Don't worry about it.
All right, so Texas during the post-World War II era was going through an economic boom, like the rest of the United States, okay? Texas had a lot of empty land on its countrysides and empty plains. Therefore, that set up an opportunity for many big businessmen to come over here and invest for a potential company or oil industry or car company, whatever it was. In this case, sports was a big deal here in Texas with football. Baseball at the time, of course, was the biggest thing going on in America. It's America's pastime as it is still today. However, in 1952, there were two brothers who purchased the Dallas Texans. Not the Dallas Cowboys, but the Dallas Texans. And that was the first professional sports team in Texas at all. But that's important to mention because they laid the groundwork and the foundation for the Dallas Cowboys, who later came here in 1960. So the Dallas Texans are another thing to mention about them is that they had 3 African-American players on the team, which is also the first integrated football team or sports team in general in Texas. And they're one of the first few integrated football teams in professional football at the time. But they were a terrible team. They were 0-11-1, and they played at the Cotton Bowl. And this is important to mention because they integrated a lot earlier than most teams did, which goes to show that Dallas was much more progressive than other teams throughout the NFL and throughout the rest of the South, which gives Dallas a really good image. But however, the team was so bad that eventually the team went bankrupt, the owners couldn't pay the bills, and then they had to sell the team back to the NFL. So then in 1959, fast forward a little bit, Clint Murchison, who was the first owner of the Dallas Cowboys, purchased the Cowboys. They started out as an expansion team, and the Cowboys were bought by him and Lamar Hunt for $500,000. And they didn't have a lot of good players on the team either, because as an expansion team, you get a bunch of players, scrap players from other franchises and rookies that didn't really make it high in the draft picks. So that's what happened with them. And then they were terrible as well. The first year, they didn't win a game. They tied, but one game. They were 0-11 or 0-12-1, I believe. But then the next year, they won 2 games, and the next year, they won 3. But then 1963 comes around. They were still a terrible team, but Dallas at the same time was still growing in economic prosperity in the football culture. Unfortunately, this led to John F. Kennedy coming into the area where he was assassinated. This gave Dallas a bad image because Dallas is known as the city of hate afterwards, and they were the home of where President Kennedy was assassinated. So not only that, the Dallasites had to live with that, and they had the whole country hovering above them, looking at them like what the heck? So not only was the country in mourning, but so was the city. Afterwards, in 1966, the Dallas Cowboys finally had a winning record, and their quarterback was Don Meredith, which is important to mention here because he went to SMU, and he's from Mount Vernon, which is very local to this story. And also he put Mount Vernon on the map and SMU, which also really boosts the Dallas image even more. And then in 1967, they went to the Ice Bowl, which they played against the Green Bay Packers. It was negative 15 degrees. They lost that game, and they lost again the next year in 1968. Then he retired all of a sudden, which Dallasites are really worried how the city's going to look and what they're going to have to worry about or be happy about anything, because they were once happy. They were once worried about how their city's going to look now that they had the Kennedy assassination, but now they had something to root for and be excited about because the Cowboys are winning. Now that their quarterback was gone, where's the team going to go? But then fast forward a few years, Roger Staubach went to play for the Dallas Cowboys, who was from the Naval Academy. And he was now the new quarterback. And then in 1971, he brought the team to the first Super Bowl against the Baltimore Colts. They lost, but that gave Dallas side something to be excited about and hopeful. And finally, in 1971 in the fall, they got their first stadium in Irving, and that was an opportunity to bring people from all over the state and all over the city to be together and be happy about and root for the Dallas Cowboys in unison. And then in 1972, they won their first Super Bowl, Super Bowl VI, and the Dallas Cowboys won in a landslide victory, and Roger Staubach was the MVP. And throughout the rest of the decade, the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas culture and the image was just this big city, the home of the Super Bowl champions, a city of winners, city of opportunity, and economic prosperity, because people were still moving into the city all the time, as they still are today. But football really played a big deal in this matter. But then after Staubach retired in 1980, the Cowboys had a little bit of success, but not much. Then in 1984, Bum Bright bought the team for $80 billion, which was at the most for any football franchise at the time. And then they didn't really have much success afterwards. But then in 1989, Jerry Jones, who is still the owner today, bought the team for $139 billion. Then their first season as a football team under Jerry Jones' ownership, they were 1-15. We're not very good. But then finally in 1992-93 season, they won their first Super Bowl. Then in 93-94, they won another one. Then in 95 and 96, they won their third one. This portion of the Dallas Cowboys franchise, the 90s decade, was much different from the 60s and 70s, because in the 70s, the Cowboys gave Dallas a good image because the players were positive, had a clean image off the field. They didn't get into trouble much, and they were winners. But in the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s, they were winners, yes, but they also got in a lot of trouble. Michael Irvin had multiple drug charges, multiple domestic violence charges. Several other players got in domestic abuse and drug charges. And there's actually a party house where the Dallas Cowboys would go where they would invite prostitutes from all over the country for rookies. And Dallas didn't have a good image, and some of it kind of came from the Dallas Cowboys. But then in 1999, the triplets, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, were no longer on the team. Well, Emmitt Smith was, but Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman weren't. And then the Dallas Cowboys have had struggles since then. However, their image has boosted the Dallas area. Dallas is still having a bunch of people from all over the world move there today. And I think a lot of it comes from the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys today are the most valuable sports franchise at $8 billion. They have fans all over the world, and mostly in Mexico, China, and the United Kingdom, and Germany. And if the Dallas Cowboys, in my opinion, didn't exist or have the success that they had, the Dallas area and Metroplex would be much different and have a different cultural and economic image than it does now. Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Do you know why they're called America's team?
So in 1978, after the Dallas Cowboys won, Super Bowl 12, they beat the Denver Broncos, and then every year afterwards, NFL would have a film special for every team. The narrator at the time was like, what am I going to do for them to make it stand out? And he said, America's team, America's team. Then ever since then, it stuck. And there's been a growing love and hatred for the Cowboys ever since. And so that's how America's team has been with the Cowboys.
How do you know about that? I don't know if it's a myth or if it's true about the hole in the top of the stadium.
That was a myth. That was more of a fan theory, a fan myth.
So God could watch his team?
God could watch his team, yes. That is true. That was in the 70s when the Cowboys, back in their best heyday, they were in their team of the decade. Texas Stadium, the old one and the one now, would open up to where there could be like a sunlight in the stadium so God could watch the team. Yes, that is true.
So they did say that?
They did say that, yes. Now, as to who exactly said that, I don't know, but I think that was more of a fan theory, if anything.
So for how much did you say that Jerry Jones purchased the team for?
$140 billion.
Lots of money.
Donald Trump was also one of the people who was offered to buy the Cowboys back in 1984. So there were several people, not just Bum Bright. He was the second owner, and also Jerry Buss, who was the owner of the Lakers at the time too. But ultimately, Bum Bright purchased the team. And then Jerry Jones.
And why do you think that the Cowboys are there other teams that get international attention like the Cowboys, or are they?
International attention, not in the NFL, but the closest one I would say is either the Packers or the Steelers. But international attention, I'd say like Barcelona or Real Madrid or the Yankees. But I would say it's mostly with Jerry Jones and his skills of marketing. I wouldn't say that's just the Dallas Cowboys winning, because they're clearly not the biggest winners right now.